If you're like me, you might have a tendency to keep playing games even if you aren't enjoying them, especially when you started a game knowing that everyone and their mother, their cat, maybe even their dog enjoyed them, or even said it was the best game of all time. And to be fair, some of my favorite games of all times are a game that someone randomly recommended, I gave it a shot, and boom, now I'm a Fire Emblem fan for life because someone convinced me that I should play Awakening one summer break. Unfortunately though, that does feel a little bit rare as we chase for our next favorite game, and we're much more likely to find a scenario like, hey, play Half-Life 1 for the very first time. It's one of the most influential games ever. You should play it. And then I play it and I almost vomit. And I don't know what it is about Half-Life, but something about it gives me motion sickness like really bad. And it's just one of those games I just found that I can't play. But this has been one of the biggest gaming traps I have fallen into with this hobby, and feeling like I need to play games to completion, which is why I wanted to talk about this a little bit today. So hopefully you'll join me. Hopefully you like the video. If you do, like it, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even hype the video if you really like it that much. Now first I want to talk about games that you've started playing and want to maybe quit. And I think this is something that's pretty natural with people who are like us, probably obsessed with media, even in movies, TV shows, where you're just looking for your next favorite thing to play, because sometimes games will tickle your brain every second you play it and even make you itch every second you're not playing it. And I think that's the gold standard of something that we're looking for when we're trying to find our next favorite game or favorite even movie or TV show. And a good example of that for me is something like Stardew Valley. Recently I played this year for about 80 hours, and I just had so much fun the entire experience, going from just clearing out my farm on the very first day to farming dozens and dozens of ancient fruit and making ancient fruit wine and all that kind of shit, and netting like 100,000 gold in one day. But then there's the flip side of that of getting Crimson Desert on like day 2 of release, as there was a lot of maybe controversial buzz, but generally it was kind of seen as, oh, this is one of the best games that has been released this year, and so many people are enjoying it. And I started playing that game, and for whatever reason, I could just not get into it. And no matter how much I tried my best to just get into this game, I just couldn't get past all the control issues and the early game slog of picking up a couple chickens for someone, or going on a long mission to go find a bunch of drunks to expand your camp. And I think the thing that ultimately leads me to this point where I actually stopped playing the game, even with all the people telling me that, hey, it gets better 20 hours in or something, and the promise of it being one of the best games of all time, is when I realized that I'm actually not enjoying the journey of the game itself, and I'm not having fun, and I'm feeling like I'm even wasting a bit of my life away while I'm playing it. And that sounds pretty harsh, but that is generally how I felt when I was playing Crimson Desert at certain points. But I don't want to make this seem like I'm just a scathing review of Crimson Desert, because I actually have still kind of popped back in just every once in a while when I'm like really bored and I just want to kill a couple things and slash things. But it's definitely not the game that I thought it would be, where I'd be playing it daily and playing it for like 4 hours after work or something every single day, like I did with something like Elden Ring. Because games are supposed to be a journey. They're not supposed to be about just completing them so you can mark it off on your backlog or something. I know I've fallen victim to that kind of mindset myself. I'm playing a game because everyone says it's good, and I just want to make sure that I check off that box to make sure I'm a valid gamer in the eyes of the masses. But with something like Crimson Desert, when I'm just know that the game is supposed to be like 100 hours, and even after about 15 or something, I'm still not really loving it the way that other people are, that's when I know it's time to maybe just take this a little bit less seriously, or come back to it at another point, even when I'm feeling a little bit more in the mood for a large scale like MMO like action game. But I know that some people are going to be able to get over that kind of thing very easily if they're kind of more used to this anyway, and they're able to just kind of get over that. I know there's a lot of people that really like books that are, most people would consider like romance slop or something, but it doesn't matter how poorly written it is. If they're enjoying it and they're having fun, then they're still going to continue. It's also why I think a lot of people like reality TV stuff. Despite it not being some sort of form of high art, people still enjoy it and get enjoyment from it. And if they're having fun, maybe getting a little drunk while they're watching it, what's really the harm? If it's helping them to release from the daily stress that they, might get from their job or something. But Crimson Desert just wasn't doing that for me. It was not helping me relieve stress. It was probably adding more stress after a long day. So that's how I knew I kind of needed to just take a step back. Which does kind of lead into this other thing of like the money trap fallacy. When you buy something so you feel the need to play it more, and that is true, and that can be a good driver sometimes. If you pay a lot of money for something, you're going to generally give it more of a chance. But at the same time, you shouldn't be playing something just because you spent a bunch of money. You kind of got to take the loss if you're just wasting another precious resource, which is your own lifespan, which is arguably more important than the money that you have in your pocket. Which is why I do like to buy physical games when I can, because then at the very least you can maybe recuperate some of your losses and you can sell the game at a later point or something, because sometimes those refund policies are either non-existent or not very fair for certain games that take a little bit of time to get into. And I don't want to get into the whole games are too expensive thing, but this is frankly why people end up turning to emulation or free-to-play games, because then they don't have to waste $80 on something that they don't even like. But that also leads me into the other thing, is sometimes it's just not the right time, which can be a good reason to maybe keep it physically, or if you got the game digitally, you're stuck with it for the rest of your life anyways, and at least until they pull it from the store and no one can even download it again, or you can't even access it online. That's a whole nother thing. But sometimes it's just not the right time for you to play a game. And a good example is, again, in one of my favorite series of all time is Fire Emblem. The very first time I played Thracia 776, I completely just bombed the whole experience and I didn't enjoy it. And one of the reasons is because I just didn't totally understand all the mechanics going into the game. And one of those was the capture mechanic. In Thracia 776, one of the more unique aspects of that game is you need to capture enemies in order to get weapons and other items that you might need for the rest of your playthrough. And if you don't do that, especially early on, you're going to have basically no weapon, because weapons do have a limited number of uses, like something like Breath of the Wild. They will eventually die out, and that's why you need to capture people. And I did not really thoroughly understand that the very first time that I played Thracia 776. So I got to a point where I just made the game basically impossible for myself because I didn't know about that. I didn't have any weapons left to play the rest of the game. So I kind of had to start from over. But before that, I just took a step away from the game. But eventually when I did come back to Thracia 776, if you haven't watched my video ranking all my Fire Emblem games, you'll know that Thracia 776 is one of my favorite Fire Emblem games of all time. And if I had just given up on it from the very start, well, I mean, I guess it just never would have been on that list at all, and I would have given up on the game. And I think this can be true, especially of older games, which might have a little bit more jank in them. Frankly, some games just require that you read the manual first before you played the game. And if you just do that before you actually start an old retro game, sometimes it might provide some clarifying things that you really need for the experience, because that's how it was intended to play. It wasn't intended for someone to just pick it up off a ROM website or something and just start playing it. But in the end of the day, it's still true. Sometimes the game is just, it's not the right time for you to play it. And sometimes, yeah, it's just the truth. You're not into this kind of game or this kind of experience, and it's just not the right time for you at this specific moment to be playing this game. That leads me to, what is the risk of doing this? The kind of extreme version of what happens when you just ignore that little thought in your head that you're not having a game, you're not enjoying it, because games are supposed to be enjoyable. And really what happens for me, at least I learned, that's usually when I end up getting burnt out on video games and this hobby in general. And sometimes that can lead to me just not enjoying any video game that I play. And sometimes that can be good, frankly. Sometimes that gives you that extra little kick in the butt to go outside and touch grass, but that is the biggest kind of looming threat, is that, for me, video games is my favorite hobby, but I don't want to get burnt out all the time playing video games. So sometimes you do have to take a step back and ultimately learn to quit on games that you're not enjoying, so that you don't burn yourself out on the entire hobby itself. But I did kind of want to talk about a little bit of a counterpoint, I guess, to this whole point of the struggle in video games, because there are a lot of video games where the struggle is kind of the point. I am a fan of like the Dark Souls series, and I kind of want to talk a little bit more about Silksong. And Silksong is frankly a hard game. Bile Water sucks, Grohl is a goddamn bitch, and there's so many other little things that do make this experience a little bit frustrating, especially for people who are not pro gamers or something. And one of the things though that was definitely infuriating while playing the game was paying for benches. As soon as you get into Act 2, you're required to start paying for benches in order to save your game. And you can see why this would be annoying. If you can't save your game, then you can't save your progress and you lose a bunch of time. And for most of the experience, I was pretty annoyed at this fact after I got to Act 2. But then after I had actually finished playing the game and I was thinking about the game later on, I kind of made the whole connection about the struggle of paying for benches is a lot like paying for parking. And if you've ever been to some place like California, you know how much it sucks to just pay for something that should be a basic need. And Silksong has kind of given me this moment to make that connection and reflect on the things in my own life that it kind of might relate to. I'm not exactly sure if that's exactly what they're trying to get at, is the fact that you have to pay for parking is why you have to pay for benches. But it is very annoying, and it's some real shit. And to get even worse, I don't live in California, I've just visited there, and that's just where it seems to be the worst. But I used to actually have to pay for parking when I would go to work. I mean, these guys would make me come into an office, I'd work, and the only way to get there is to drive, and then they'd have the audacity to make me pay for parking just so I could go work for them. That's kind of what I've taken from Silksong and paying for benches. It's kind of just a moment to reflect on how stupid it is that you might just have to pay for something that really should just be a basic need. So sometimes I do think there is a greater point to adding some sort of struggle in video games. But I think the difference between something like the struggle of Silksong and the struggle of Crimson Desert is that I just wasn't really having fun with the entire journey of Crimson Desert as opposed to something like Silksong. And that's where it separates, where I didn't, stop playing Silksong as soon as I got to Act 2, but with something like Crimson Desert, I basically gave up with the game after about like 10-15 hours. And then kind of the final thing for this is more of a personal problem, but as a guy who makes videos on the internet, I am constantly battling the fact that it makes sense for me to give a game a fair shot before talking about it online and, potentially making a decent amount of money from ad revenue or people or whatever. And I do feel this tendency that I need to go play an actual game to completion and make an actual video on it, which I do think is very fair. You shouldn't just like go play a game for 2 hours, shit all over it, because then I know from experience, people who actually really enjoy the game and come onto your videos and then shit all over it, which is definitely a lesson I've learned a little bit more. I'm trying to be more transparent exactly where I got to in a certain video game, especially if I did not complete it. So at least people who are watching the video have at least a little bit of context on where I left off in the game, because then you're gonna get comments in the video like, this video was trying to murder my brain cells, which is true. I'm a content creator, as they say. It is my job to melt your brain and avoid you from critical thinking. Duh, I don't know why you're here. But yeah, sometimes you do gotta rant about something and, get it off your chest. So that being said, every once in a while I like to make one of these kind of videos. So if you do enjoy it, let me know in the comment section below. Or if I just murdered your brain cells and you have something to get off on your chest down below, then go off, King. I don't know. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully like, subscribe, or hype the video if you really think this was that cool, especially this kind of video if you really want to see more of this like this, because I don't do it as often.